This time we're going to introduce Andrew Shean. He is the Chief Academic Officer at LAPU, and we're going to kick off the second half of our day. So it's my pleasure to introduce him. Dr. Shean will walk us through what it really takes to succeed with AI implementation. This session will focus on testing, iterating, and learning from real-world pilots. It's a practical mindset shift from using AI to truly integrating it. Andrew, welcome. Take it away.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here, everybody. Do I need to put my presentation up? There we go. All right, let's kick it off. So we'll do a lot in 25 minutes. I like to use the chat a lot, so hopefully those of you guys are focused and engaged. Dive into the chat, it'll be fun. How many of you guys remember the movie that this person is from? Anybody remember? Man, this is from City Slickers, and this is one of my favorite movies, and this is one of my favorite moments. It's when Billy Crystal's character sort of like going through a bit of like a midlife crisis, and he has this profound moment where he says, what's the secret of happiness? What's the secret of life? He's like, just one thing. So you're going to hear a lot today from me. If I could give you that same wisdom, just one thing to take away from it, it's this. Persistence is disguised as genius. And I don't know if you can see that in the background, but that's Thomas Edison. My team knows this. I'm a big fan of The Obstacles Away by Ryan Holiday. And he goes through like a lot of really provocative, profound stories of people that you know to be famous, but he paints a more deep picture of what it really took to get there. Any guesses on how many times Thomas Edison tested and failed? He wouldn't call it failure, by the way, but tested and failed before he eventually figured out the light bulb. The rumor is between 1,000 and 10,000 times. So isn't that crazy? He said, I have not failed. I've just found 10K ways that didn't work. And to me, that's like the greatest example of not seeing failure as failure, but seeing as learning. And then eventually had breakthrough. So persistence is disguised as genius. So what it really takes to be successful is relentless effort, dedication, overcoming failures. And you're going to hear that in some of these examples that I'm going to share with you. It was absolutely not one idea implemented and scaled in one shot that got us to the goal. It was many iterations. Test, iterate, learn, repeat. That's the one thing that I hope you take away from today. Okay, so just quick agenda. I know that's small. I'm sorry, but I want to tell you just a little bit about me. I want to do a quick warm up, and then I'm going to give you some examples with a lot of data, and then hopefully we'll have time for a little bit of a discussion. So a little bit about me. I like to tell the stories because I think it's kind of unique and funny. My parents were actually direct students, disciples of a guy named Trungpa Rinpoche, who's a crazy wisdom teacher. This is actually a picture of me next to him on what's now called Rocky Mountain Dharma Center in Colorado. It's actually fairly large, but way back then in the late 70s, it was really small. And so I grew up on a Buddhist commune. I eventually became a Christian and really proud to be part of LAPU and integrate faith into my professional life. And as I was older, my parents used to say, here comes St. Andrew to save us to the dinner table. But my story I like to tell is as a young child, Rinpoche would give kids at the commune a middle name as a blessing. And so my middle name was Sopa, which means patience. And if you work with me, you know I like to go really fast. So I think he was being ironic. And the other funny thing is I made my initials Andrew Sopa Shean, so ass. So that was fun. Thank you for that, Rinpoche. Another interesting thing is that is my real license. When I show this, when I do keynotes, people often say like, why didn't you use suntan lotion? But I'm just sharing this because that is like how I really feel inside, a little bit crazy. I use ChatGPT to adjust that headshot though, and that's what it looks like now. Just kidding. And then maybe something else about me that's interesting, unique, is that my wife and I won the Four Seasons $100,000 wedding in Dallas way back when. And my favorite part about that experience was that they gave us a 5K each, 10K total shopping spree to North Park Mall. That was a lot of fun. In this particular moment at my wedding, I've had a few drinks, and this is my wife under the table telling me to slow down. That's real life. Maybe something more professional you may have not known about me is that I recently was tasked with chairing Learning Mate's Higher Education, AI, and Data Analytics Advisory Board, which there's now about 7 other members. Really exciting, and we get a chance to speak with Learning Mate. If you don't know about Learning Mate, it's a $1 billion company, and they do a lot with AI. And so we have the opportunity to meet with some of the real thought leaders in the space and sharing. It's been a real honor, and I've certainly learned a ton and hope to integrate a little bit of that in this presentation. All right, get ready for a quick warm-up before we dive in. Let's do this with movies that have an AI component to them. Harrison Ford, Blade Runner, one of my favorite movies of all time. Guess what year the first Blade Runner supposedly took place, right? Where we have like synthetic robots. Guess what year Blade Runner took place? Good guess. The sequel was 2049. The original was 2019. Isn't that crazy? What about Her? Remember you saw the movie Her, where he kind of begins to have like a love affair with a robot, an intelligent robot. You may guess what that is? That's 2025. That's right now. I love that movie too. What about Terminator with Arnold? I'll be back. Anybody guesses? So check out Terminator, the actual nuclear war, when the robots became aware, took place in 1997. And then the actual war in which the humans fought back took place in 2029. Isn't that crazy? And then finally, one of my all-time favorite movies, certainly my kids' all-time favorite movies, WALL-E, which is sort of scary because they destroy the Earth and they have to go live in a space bubble far away. Anybody guesses when WALL-E took place? What year? 2805. So hopefully we're a long ways from destroying the Earth and having to live on a space bubble. Okay. So with that, a little bit about me, a little bit of a warm up. Let's get into it. I love this quote. It's hard to predict especially the future. Niels Bohr. I think this is a great. And who would have been able to predict COVID? And who would have been able to predict that the 3.5 version of ChatGPT would launch and in 2 months have 2 million adopters? The fastest by for adoption of any technology product ever in the history. And it's not even close. And I know all of you are here for an AI conference. You already sort of know that. But my point really that I want to sort of like make with an exclamation is this isn't going away. This isn't a fad. I don't know if you guys remember Google Glasses. I thought that everybody was going to have to wear glasses, even if you didn't need them, because this was just going to go widespread. Turns out that didn't end up catching so much. It's like the tech hype fall thing that you've seen so much of, the curve. But that's not the case with generative AI. We are at a true watershed moment. And that's why I'm so proud of the team for putting on this conference and sharing knowledge and getting knowledge, because we absolutely need to lean in. And I love this quote from Arthur C. Clarke: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, because like any good fantasy, you can do great things with magic, but you can also do bad things with magic. And the same is true of AI, right? It's been described as AI is like more important than like fire, more important than electricity, but fire, electricity, magic, you can do good things, you can do bad things. And so we need to do good things. And so really the frame that I want to give you for my presentation is how to think about setting up an environment, a culture, building muscle around how to figure out how to do really good things with AI. And I'll start with a story, which is the clay pot parable. And I don't know if any of you guys have heard this before, but I've really fallen in love with it. And so I was about a year ago when I was the chief learning officer at Penn Foster Group. We all got together for 2 days of workshops. And let me tell you, I have a hard time sitting still and paying attention for an hour. So 2 days sitting down and paying attention was almost impossible for me. But when the speaker began to go in about the clay pot parable, I was immediately engaged. I was fascinated. And here's the clay pot parable. Essentially, you have two groups. You have a quality group and you have a quantity group. Okay, the quality group is told that their grade is going to be based on a single perfect pot. So they spend the entire time trying to make that single perfect pot magnificent, and they get the grade. Quality group, right? They're told it's just based on it's based on sheer output. So you have an opportunity to try and try and try and try and learn and learn and learn and learn, and then eventually you get the output that you desire. And it turned out, as you might imagine, the quantity group was the group that had the higher quality pots. And so the way that it's been described to me is one of the most powerful lessons from the clay pot parable is that like broken pots, an ugly pot is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And that relates back to that Thomas Edison quote, right? Failure is not failure, it's learning. So breaking a lot of pots, creating a lot of ugly pots en route to creating this optimal pot, like that's the mindset, that's the mantra, that's the one thing that I want to share. And so the message really is build, implement, share, test, learn, iterate. All right, so there's got to be like a frame to do that, especially when you're in an environment that in order to really scale ideas, you need data. And so this is a slide that my dear friend, Dr. Michael Kalaji, shared with me when he came back and got his PhD at Pepperdine in Learning Sciences. And I just give him a shout out anytime I can. He unfortunately passed away in a motorcycle accident 2 years ago, but was really instrumental in the way that I thought about testing and learning. So love you, Mike. What is this slide saying? First of all, it's educational research, which is messy. And so how do you approach it with a frame that embodies that idea of testing and learning and iterating? And the idea here is you first start with, well, what's success look like? What is it that we actually want to accomplish in our big idea in testing? And so let's just say that there's a measurable outcome. Maybe it's course completions. Maybe it's NPS. Maybe it's a grade. Maybe it's what have you. But you put the current, like what's happening currently, and then you put the expected change you want to have. That's what's happening on the right. And then the idea here is you are intentionally setting up a scenario in which you have a belief that you're not going to get this right on your first design round, right? You have the original idea, you have round one, round two, round three. You set the stage for that testing and learning and iteration before you get to your optimal result, right? Like that's the framework that's in place that sort of embodies that clay pot mentality. So let me get into some real examples just to show you how this plays out in real life. So this is work that comes from the Penn Foster group. This is a biology course in the vet tech program. By far one of the most difficult and most failed courses in that program. You can see by that graph, although it's really small, what's basically happening is you're seeing a very, very low completion rate and you're seeing a very high fail. Not only fail the course, but fail and withdraw from the program. And so then what you're seeing on the left is you're seeing that kind of broken pot, that design research model implemented in real life. We had this original idea of what we thought could improve the course, which we called our LADS model, which is essentially creating learning content that's more learner-centered, that enables students to do more situated, authentic application of learning, that's more active, so more as opposed to passive, that's differentiated, especially with multimodal learning. And then finally, it's skill-based. And so we in each design shift, we took one of those individual treatments and we tested them out and we learned and we tested them again. And then eventually in that phase 3 design shift, we were able to put it all together. And that's when you can see on that graph, you see the rocket ship ride up, right? So this idea of a learning framework was not something that we implemented day one and got right. It took testing and iteration before we got the lift. So that's example number one, vet tech bio. The second example, and this is one of my favorites, and it ended up being a case study that this company Learnosity uses as part of their marketing materials, but it really is a profound outcome. But before I tell you about the pilot with Learnosity that was successful, what I want to tell you about is the couple of experiments prior to this that weren't successful. So the first thing at Penn Foster Group that we tried to do, by the way, this is for high school English. At Penn Foster Group, their online high school is the largest online high school in America, over 100,000 students. And so you can imagine the number of papers that students have to submit and be graded is significant. And so if you have students that are failing and having to resubmit, your grading costs go sky high, your students' frustration goes sky high. And so figuring out how to address that challenge is real. And so that was the real problem we were trying to solve, in addition to the fact that the completion rates were low. So what are we going to do? We thought, oh my gosh, well, what if we could do something with AI that can enable the student both to get automatic feedback, but also support the faculty who's doing the grading? And so we started off with just basically a chat GPT, a companion for our graders that they were able to plug in the rubric and use it to grade. That was good. We learned that the AI feedback was generally pretty consistent with our faculty feedback. So that was a real positive, but it wasn't scalable. We couldn't do that when you had 100,000 students in one program. It just wasn't going to be scalable enough. And so that was the original test. We said, okay, there's something here, but it's not scalable. We have to try round two. So round two, we went to a different company, a great company called Feedback Fruits. And we implemented it, the same concept, right? On the LMS, the student would turn in the paper. The Feedback Fruits would give the student automatic feedback so that they could see where they may have opportunities to refine. And then eventually they would do their final submission. And then the faculty would have that AI recommended grade and feedback that they could personalize and tailor and make their own. That actual test showed very little positive results. And so all of us were really surprised, but we had embraced that test, learn, iterate model. And so we thought, okay, what do we need to tweak? And so we dug in and we analyzed and we looked for what happened. What we found out is that the AI engine that Feedback Fruits was using at the time, they've since changed, was focused almost entirely on grammar. And students really wanted much more content feedback than just grammar feedback. And so we ended up going with a different company, Learnosity Feedback Aid. And if you don't know who Learnosity is the assessment company that almost every single large publisher uses behind the scenes. So it's a very large company that spinned off this new venture in Feedback Aid. And so we worked with Learnosity. We figured out a better way to deploy it so that it did much more than just grammar feedback. And this is the key. And I really want to hit this hard. And we figured out that as opposed to waiting for students to get to the end of the assignment in which they would write and then submit and get feedback, what if we scaffolded Feedback Aid along the way? And so this was our iteration number 3. And so what we did is we took the writing process. Imagine you're back in high school and you got to write an intro, and then you got to write, your 3 main body paragraphs, and then you got to write your conclusion. We stepped the student each way through the writing process, giving them automated, tailored feedback along the way. Then we gave them lots of practice, right? Practice all along the way in these courses, so that writing started to become much more routine. And this is important. It was very low stakes. We didn't give them a grade, but we required it, right? And so this is where I think assessment should be more of a GPS than an autopsy, right? What if assessment was really for learning? And so that's being deployed here. Students are constantly practicing in a low stakes environment, and they're getting tons of feedback in an automated fashion. This is like when Benjamin Bloom talks about the two sigma problem. This is what's possible with good magic, good AI. You can literally create an affordable, scaled one-on-one tutor if deployed well. And that's what's happening here. And then finally, we took them through interactive exercises. So that third round, not the first round, not the second round, the third round of trying, of testing and iterating, we got to where we wanted to be. And you can see I highlighted 2 key outcomes, which is a 21% return rate when originally it was 44%. That's huge. That's huge when you have over 100,000 students. I mean, that's many, many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're saving on grading. But more importantly, and that's the second item here, is that students were submitting these through the scaffolding and through the automated feedback prior to the actual faculty member grading it. They were submitting it multiple times. And so they were getting all of this practice and all this feedback before finally submitting their final version. And so that really excited me as a chief academic officer and a chief learning officer. We're seeing students take advantage of this tool, improve the quality of their writing, that eventually boosted overall completion rates. And so this was a really successful pilot that's now scaled. But the key message that I want to share with you outside of the idea itself, which I think is worthy, is that it didn't take us one and done to get there. It took us multiple iterations and learnings before we eventually got the outcome we wanted. All right. The other example I want to share with you, and I know I'm running fast on time. The other example I want to share with you is ReadSpeaker. And so I'm super pumped when George told me that the LAPU team has integrated ReadSpeaker into our environment. When I was at the Penn Foster Group, we actually had a lot of debates about this. A lot of our team was worried. By the way, if you don't know ReadSpeaker is a company that can integrate directly into your content It's got an AI power tool behind it that essentially is able to create an audio version of all your content. So students can listen to the content while driving, while walking. For students that maybe haven't been to school in a while and struggle with reading, long text, ReadSpeaker can be really powerful. But the debate that we got was like, we don't want students to not learn how to read or to not improve their reading. We're worried that if we implement ReadSpeaker, we might affect that. Hey, fair critique. But inevitably, we ended up wanting to go through with it, and we started with 4 or 5 different fairly difficult courses, like a biology course, a science course, I think a literature course. And believe it or not, the first time we implemented this, it wasn't successful. Our pilot showed basically no difference between the treatment and non-treatment group, and everybody was surprised. Similar to the Learnosity feedback aid story. We're like, okay, what happened? Let's learn from it. We dug in. We even interviewed students, and we found out that we didn't do a very good job highlighting the ReadSpeaker tool, where it was located in the classroom. And specifically, it was actually located like on the left-hand corner of the LMS more broadly, as opposed to integrated directly in the course itself. And so as something as simple as moving location and highlighting it with a quick how-to in our second round of implementation got us staggering results. I'm just going to tell you right now, I don't believe in this particular number. I don't think we saw a 54% increase in completions. I think that's probably a little bit high, but I can tell you that is what actually was reported. And so I'm going to guess it's somewhere in the 20% range, and you're probably seeing an anomaly here because there may be 1 or 2 courses that got a huge lift, but we didn't see a 54% writ large. So I just want to be transparent about that. But we did see a significant improvement, and we saw the time to get to an exam go from 13 days to 9 days. So this was a big win for us. I don't have time to talk about this next one, but I'll just share with you that when I was at Arizona State Global, we tested a lot with adaptive learning. We tested a lot with on-demand tutoring, and we tested a lot with interactive scenarios that enabled students to do more real-life application. And we combined all those individual tests and learning together into one course. We saw a huge lift. And this was actually sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Got a chance to share it with them. And I think it's become part of their overall research and work they do to prioritize where they fund and give philanthropic work. All right. My message, hopefully the one thing is that the best way to approach creating magic with AI is not one and done. It's testing, it's iterating, it's testing, it's iterating, it's learning, repeat. So check this stat out. This came from my work on the board. One of the board members had worked with Boston Consulting. They told us, Boston Consulting, that 90% of AI pilots fail. 90%, not because they're a bad idea, but because of people and process. So I'm telling you that my belief is that the process part is test, learn, iterate. Test, learn, iterate. All right, hopefully you don't feel like that. That's how I feel every day. But I hope you had at least 1 or 2 nuggets that you can gain from this. I feel blessed to be part of the LAPU team, feel blessed to share with you all.